Now that the assembly and cleanup has been completed, it's time to apply a finish that will complement your work. Normally, this would entail sandblasting, followed by a good metal primer, and finally 2 coats of a quality finish paint. But suppose you just completed a hand-forged door for your client's wine cellar. You don't want to cover that beautiful hammer work up under 3 coats of paint, do you? No way. How about a traditional oil and wax finish instead? Suppose you've been working in copper or brass or bronze. Maybe you'd like to apply a nice warm patina as opposed to a highly polished finish that your client may or may not maintain anyway. That's the purpose of today's video, is to show you those finishes and more. But where do we get started? The first place is by reading. Do you want to read about oil and wax finishes? Or maybe patina finishes? How about some painted finishes? And finally, do you want to learn how to gold leaf? Once you complete this reading list, come back and we'll get started with our demonstration. Now that you've completed your reading assignment, let me show you a few of the materials we're going to use today. We've got some beeswax, we've got carnauba wax, tree wax and paste wax. We even have some liquid wax. We've got some linseed oil and some turpentine. We even have a little Japan dryer. We've got silver leaf and gold leaf. We've got Mason's colors. We've got bronze powders. We even have some metallic coatings, brass, bronze, and copper. We have some pre-mixed patinas. We have some chemicals to make our own patinas. We have patina brushes. We have paint brushes. We even have a brass brush. We have some chemical blackener. We have some shellac. We use a little graphite. We've even got some glaze. We've got some various sprayers. We even have some trunk paint. And finally, we have some plastic. We'll use all of these and more in today's demonstration. Probably the finish that's most commonly associated with iron or steel is an oil and wax finish. Today I'm going to demonstrate that using this baluster here. The baluster has been sandblasted to prepare it to accept the finish. You can also just wire brush your work if you can remove all the scale that way. But since most of these areas had a lot of mill scale on, the best and easiest thing to do was to sandblast them. The mixture I'm going to use is a combination of paste wax, turpentine, linseed oil, and a little Japan dryer to help speed up the drying process. Formula for this finish and all others that I will demonstrate today will be included with your video. In order for this material to accept the finish, we have to heat it to between 200 and 400 degrees. And the best way to do that is by using a propane torch or an acetylene torch. The torch that I would least recommend would be an oxyacetylene torch, as it burns with too intense a flame. This is a much softer flame and will not burn the finish once it's been applied. What this is doing is opening the pores of the material so that as opposed to just sitting on the surface, it will actually penetrate, thereby holding up much longer. This finish is associated more with interior work, but in some areas of the country I'm sure it would hold up quite well in an exterior application. You can tell when your metal is hot enough when you touch the brush to it, and you can see your material, your wax, melt immediately and not just sit on top of the surface. This finish really works best if it's a piece that has been heavily forged and you can simply wire brush it to get the scale off. It seems to have much more character, many more highlights and lowlights. There's as many formulas for doing this as there are books that you would read. Some suggest using linseed oil with beeswax. Others, you apply a coat of oil and later a coat of wax. So it's just whatever you find works best, gives you the finish you like. To maintain this, you'd simply dust it and apply a fresh coat of wax. At a later date. Now, if you get any buildup on here, you want to wipe it off prior to letting it dry completely. It'll give you a much better finish. And I think the whole piece dries faster when you don't have a lot of excess material sitting there. You're going to end up buffing it off anyway, so. Okay, now that we've got our piece completely coated, we'll set it aside and let it dry. And then we'll come back and buff it with a clean rag. Another alternative to painting is simply applying a wax over your bare metal. This is a liquid wax. There's no oil, no turpentine, no dryer involved. It is called Satin Shield. It's made by Birchwood Casey. And all I've got to do here, I've got a baluster that I'm simply going to wire brush to take off the loose scale and then apply this wax to it. This is a water-based wax that can be thinned as much as 1:1. You can spray it or brush it on. These bubbles will dissipate. Probably, today's climate, it'll probably take about half an hour for this to dry. And when it does, again, I'll just buff it. I've used this on a number of interior pieces, and I think it gives a very, very nice finish. Half the effort of the oil and wax. Okay, give it some time to dry, and then we'll buff it. The next product we're going to use is a chemical blackener that works on iron, steel, or nickel. What I'm going to do, I have a wallpaper tray here. I've lined it with plastic. I'm going to pour my material in here, and we're going to dip our items, which have been sandblasted to remove all the scale. That's a crucial part. I'm going to dip it in there, let it sit for a moment, bring it out, rinse them off, and dry them. Now, in working with chemicals like this blackener or any of the patinas, you need to wear rubber gloves and a respirator. Now it's critical that these pieces be sandblasted to remove all the scale, as this will not work on fire scale or mill scale. Let's do our two longest pieces. This is almost an instantaneous process when the material has been prepared properly. Once I get them out, I'm going to take them over and rinse them in water to stop the action, and then dry them with a cloth. And one last piece. Now, by dipping them like this, I'm going to be able to recover most of this solution, and while it won't be quite as strong the next time, I will be able to get a couple of uses out of it. Okay, let me take those over and rinse them off. Now that we have rinsed and dried these pieces, we need to put a protective sealer on it. In this case, I'm going to use some more of the liquid wax that I showed earlier. But before I do so, I'm going to take a piece of Scotch-Brite and just lightly go over this to again create some high spots and some highlights to this, so we don't have one flat black. This will bring a little of the silver from the base metal up. But you need to put a sealer on this once you're done. Okay, I said that it's advisable to put a sealer on this. And initially I was going to put some more of the liquid wax on. But I decided they look so nice the way they are, and the wax tends to give it a glossier finish, that I'm going to put a satin urethane spray over it. There's some nice hammer work down here on these pieces, so we don't want the gloss wax to hide that. What I'm going to do is add a simple highlight to this twisted area. I'm going to heat the metal, again 200, 300, 400 degrees, thereabouts. And I'm going to rub it with this brass bristle brush. What will happen is the brass will melt onto here and leave this with a slight bronze patina to it. Just enough on here to make it interesting. The next finish we're going to apply is a verdigris finish to a cast iron post. Now to prepare this, it has been primed and I've painted it with a bronze tone paint. I think with the verdigris, because you're simulating bronze, that you want an undercoat that has a bronze tone to it. Bronze in nature, or brass in nature, would tend to turn brown, then perhaps black, and then given the proper environment, greens or blues also would come out. So I've painted this with a bronze paint, and now I'm going to prepare my patina that I'm going to apply to this. To prepare the finish, I'm going to use this copper carbonate. It is a mason's color. It's used to color ceramics. I'm going to use this, some shellac, that will be the bonding agent, and the vehicle to spray it in is denatured alcohol. Denatured alcohol being the natural thinner for shellac. I'm going to mix this approximately 1 part copper carbonate to 1 part shellac The shellac will be the agent that will cause it to bond to the post. 4, 6, 7. Now I will thin this with denatured alcohol, somewhere between 7 and 10 parts alcohol. Now I'm just going to use a simple spray bottle. You can use a spray gun or you could use a brush to apply this. Now the alcohol will burn off very rapidly. In addition, the surface texture of the post itself will help it adhere. This post, by the way, was kindly donated by Lawler Foundry. Now we'll give that a minute for it to dry and see where we are. Okay, this has received 2 coats, and the elapsed time has probably been no more than 5 minutes. Now, if you want to bring out some of the highlights, you can take a rag with some denatured alcohol on it and rub some of the high areas. To add even a little bit more. Now this is suitable for exterior work without a coating on top of it. This should last at least 3 years. You'll see some minor changes in it, but then again, that's what you're looking for, aren't you? Okay, you can get an idea of the change that we've made. This fence section is the same color that this post started. Now I'm going to take and paint the fence the same way. The fence is a little more of a challenge because unlike the post, which has so many high and low areas, we have essentially a flat surface. So we may not get quite the character that we will out of this post, but we will make a significant difference in the finish on this paint, in this fence. Again, we don't need any elaborate paint equipment to do this. It's just a simple plastic spray bottle. And you can do a significant section of fence or railing in a very short amount of time. Okay, again, as you can see, this has been no more than 5 minutes from the time I've sprayed this to where it's dry. And again, if you think that you've got too much on it, or if you want to bring out some highlights, you'd simply take a rag and rub it down with alcohol. But that's a pretty nice finish, I think, in next to no time at all. Very little effort. The next finish I'm going to demonstrate is a rust finish. This is just as simple as the other one, only this is a two-part process. I'm going to start with a mixture of iron oxide, this would be the red, and a mixture of yellow ochre, which is the yellow. These are both ores of iron found naturally in the earth. Again, I'm going to mix these approximately 1 part powder to 1 part shellac and from 7 to 10 parts alcohol. And I'm going to alternate. I'm going to spray on a little red, followed by a little yellow, and a little red until I get the finish that I like. Again, the shellac is what's going to cause it to bond to the metal. There are a lot of chemical rust finishes you can use. But most of them, in order to use them outside, you need to put a sealer over them. And this, I can apply with no sealer, and I know that it's going to hold up for several years, and I think it looks better. I can apply this over a primed and painted finish, such as this railing, which again was sandblasted, primed, and this was painted black. I don't think you need to paint it any other color. I think black works just fine for a base for this. Uh-oh. We want a mist, not a jet. Again, these are just simple plastic spray bottles, and this is going to take longer to dry than it does to apply. Now we'll alternate layers with this yellow. We'll continue this until we get what we're happy with. And there's no need to let the coats dry in between. You want these to blend in with one another. I can't imagine how long it would take you to apply a chemical finish to a piece like this. Now, let's let this dry and we'll see if we need to add some more to it. This has had 2 or 3 minutes to dry. And now I see some areas that I need some more. So a little bit of red. Followed by a little yellow. As you can see, we've done approximately a 2-foot section of fence or railing in 5 minutes. I think it gives it a nice appearance. It's one that will hold up outdoors. It's very easy to apply, very inexpensive. I've got a bar stool here that I'm going to put a rust finish on, just like I did with the railing. Only I've done something different with this. Since the chair is made out of tubing, which is such a smooth surface and it's hard to get much character to, I've gone ahead and painted auto trunk paint along this. It gives it a little bit of tooth and a little bit of surface texture, which would be more in keeping with rust that we're eventually going to end up with. So rather than just a smooth, slick surface without any character, we've got some texture. You can feel it along here and see it. So that when we apply our finish, it's got something to grab a hold of and will, I think, end up making for a nicer piece of work. Again, I'm going to start with a spray of red oxide. Now that I've got the red on, I'm going to go ahead and add some of the yellow while the red is still wet. And let the two colors blend together. Got another coat of the red that I'm applying. And again, I'm not waiting for the other coats to dry, which will all bleed into one another. And putting on one more coat of yellow, of fine mist, then we'll let it dry and see how it turns out. Now, if I didn't know better myself, I would think that this chair was 70, 80, maybe 100 years old, judging by the finish on it. It was very simple. We probably don't have more than 5 minutes into the finish. Very easy to do, and again, very inexpensive, using the mason's colors. The first thing we need to do to prepare to gold leaf is to apply a size. And the size is what will make the gold adhere to your material. Gold will only adhere to the area that have been sized. This particular size is a quick drying size. I mean, I can apply it and within 1 to 3 hours it is ready for leafing. You can also buy a slow drying size, which will give you up to 24 hours time before it will not accept the leaf anymore. The gold itself comes in a book form. These squares are 3 3/8 by 3 3/8. Now, the proper way to apply the gold leaf to a flatter surface than what we're working with would be to lift up the whole leaf off of the backing paper and apply it. But since we have such an irregular surface, it's so awkward, I'm simply going to take the leaf while still on the paper and press it in place. I'm sure there's some gilder out there someplace that will say, no, 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 no. It isn't how you do that. Again, we just use our brush to get it down into crevices. Of all the finishes that you can do, gold leafing is probably going to take the most practice, but it's liable to have the greatest impact on your client. It's not nearly as expensive as one thinks, but it makes quite an impression for the finished product. Now, for interior applications, if you want something other than gold leaf, you can use silver leaf, which cannot be used outdoors or it will tarnish. Or they make what they call Japan leaf, which comes in a variety of colors. You could get variegated leaf, copper leaf, or if you wanted a silver appearance for exterior work, you could use aluminum leaf. Okay, the next finish we're going to do is we're going to apply a metal coating to something we already have and then add a patina to it to create an effect totally different from what we started with. In this instance, what I'm going to do is put a metal coating, either bronze, brass, or copper, on these cast iron parts, and then I'll come back with a patina, which will change the colors, and we'll end up something like what we have here. These are aluminum rosettes that I have, in some instances, added a copper base coat to it, and then on top of that added, in this case, a little red and a little rust patina to it. I think I have a bronze base to this, followed by a blue patina, copper with a yellow patina over it. So as you can see, we're starting with aluminum, very readily available, very inexpensive, and we're giving it a look to appear that it may be bronze, it may be copper. It's certainly something other than what you started with. And you can do so much with the colors, it's quite amazing. In fact, these rosettes are aluminum. This piece here is made out of permastone, which is a plaster of Paris type material. And I've primed it to help seal the surface, and then I painted it with a brass metal finish over the top, over which I added a green patina. So you can add this to wood, to metals, to glass, ceramics, whatever you want, and create just an unlimited amount of effects. They make a metal coating C, which is a 3-part mixture that you would put on 2 or 3 layers, and you can actually go back and buff your material to shine it. You could use a buffing wheel. And again, with it, you can add a patina once it's dried. Okay, we'll let this dry a little bit and put a second coat on it. Okay, the second one, I'm going to use a copper metal coating. And again, this one, once it's dry, I can put a patina on it. They offer these metal coatings in brass, bronze, copper, pewter, iron, and steel. And there may be one or two others. Once you apply the patina, you need to apply a sealer. Certainly if it's going to be outdoors, but even indoors it would be recommended. Okay, let's let this dry. And we'll come back and add a second coat. What I have are two steel pipes that I've heated and crushed. This was the way they both started. Here I've taken and added a bronze metal coating to it. And what I'm going to do is with a red patina, I'm going to apply to this and hopefully end up with something similar to this rosette where you can see the reds and the bronze shining through. Now it'll take, maybe in the neighborhood of 30 minutes or so for this patina to react. I'll go ahead and get this ready. Use the red patina. Now this is called Vista Patina Red, and it's a two-part patina. It's got chemicals that will react with the bronze metal coating and create some shades of green and blue. In addition, it's got some red powders which will give us this red that we're looking at. I'm using a natural sponge, just like maybe you've seen people using to create faux finishes on walls, and I'm just stippling it on. Okay, the patina we have put over our bronze metal coating appears to have dried. And if you could see down in the deeper areas, some of the red has settled in a little bit more. There's a few greens popping out. What I'm going to do is take a piece of Scotch-Brite and rub this down a little bit and highlight. Take away some of the top coat, have a little bit more of the bronze underneath showing through. Some here on the edges would wear. And then when this is done, it needs to be top coated. And there's a variety of sealers you can use. Which we'll talk about in a minute. You can apply several of these patinas of varying colors to create your own effect. Now let me take a rag and I will wipe that off. We'll talk about sealers. Okay, I've gone ahead and I've added a second coat. This is the copper base metal, and this is the brass. Now, I guess if you wanted to, you could leave them this way, or you can add one of the patinas to create any number of effects for them. Greens, reds, blues, yellows, blacks. But now let's get back to sealing the pipe that we've already worked on. There's any number of sealers that you can use. We have, from Sculpt Nouveau, we have a water-based sealer with rust inhibitors. This is for use over bronze, brass, copper, or any of the metal coatings. This is a lacquer from G.J. Nicholas. And again, this will go over any of these coatings to help protect it. But the one that I use, the one that I like the best, is called Incralac. And it is made for copper, brass, and bronze. Now I buy it, it's made by StandChem Company. I buy it from a company that then repackages it into these aerosol cans. You can buy it in 5-gallon drums if you would like, but I prefer to buy it prepackaged into these aerosol cans. And what you want to do is simply several light coats. Once your sealer has dried, if you want to, you can add a coat of wax to it, and then subsequently come back and add another coat of wax as it needs it. We can use, this is tree wax with carnauba. You can use paste wax. You can use beeswax. Probably the tree wax is as good as any that you'll find. And again, this piece would be suitable to be left outside with a coat of wax on it, and then maybe every few months or maybe as often as seldom as a year, you'd come back and just wipe it down and put a fresh coat of wax on it and buff it. The next finish that I'm going to demonstrate is a glaze finish. Some would call it antiquing. All it is simply we're going to paint a glaze on here and wipe off the high spots and let the color settle into the low areas. The nice thing about the glaze as opposed to a paint is the glaze is translucent. So it lets color behind it, it lets some of that color pass through, as opposed to just sitting on the surface and obscuring anything that's underneath it. So the glaze I'm going to use is a latex glaze. Now if you find that it's too thick, or the color is too intense and you want to thin it, don't add water. That will only speed the drying time. You have to buy a special extender to mix with the glaze. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use sort of a dry brush where I'm going to get the end of my brush wet and then tap it on the paper to take off a lot of the glaze and then start applying it to this urn that was generously donated for this demonstration by Tennessee Fabricating. If you get too much on, you just take a wet rag and take it off. You have a little more working time with oil glazes, but for what we're doing, I don't think we'll have a problem. Again, you want to keep your brush as dry as you can and still put some material on there. The less you put on, the less you have to take off. Okay, now with a slightly damp rag, just got to go over, hit some of the high spots. There we have it. Now, a nice effect, you can take several colors and layer them on. And again, because the glaze is translucent, you're going to get a little bit of every level of color. You're not going to obscure what is underneath. It makes for a nice effect, and it's very easy to do. What I have is a railing section, and I've tried to simulate what we might have if you were sitting on a stair stringer. And I'm going to use glazes to give this what some would call an antique appearance. I've got a gray glaze, and then I'm going to go over that with a white. The problem we have is because we have so many smooth, flat surfaces that it's hard to get a nice appearance. Unlike with the urn, with so many highs and lows, that naturally lends itself to a glazing effect. What I'm going to do, I want a little more working time, so I've added some glaze extender to my material. I'm going to go ahead with my first coat of glaze, which is gray. I'm going to cover the entire section. I think I'll have enough working time. If not, I'll find out soon enough. You don't have to get it on too thick. You're going to be taking some of it back off. With the urn, I used a dry brush. This time I want the brush wetter. I'll get more material on. And let's go ahead and do the stringer. I'm going to go ahead and take some of it off. A little bit more up here. And the easiest way to take it off, I have some plastic. Just going to put it over. And just rub. Plastic will pull a lot of it off. You just simply lay the plastic on it, rub your hand over, fresh piece of material. works good on your walls at home if you're painting. But easier than sponging or ragging. Now, if you think you have too much on, you can always go through back with a wet rag and take just a little bit of it off. Okay, what I'm going to do now is apply a hot patina to this brass casting that I have here. What I did earlier with the metal coatings was apply a cold patina. The chemical blackener that we used earlier would be an example of a cold patina. This one, what I'm going to do is heat the surface of the material, again 200, 300 degrees thereabouts, and then apply what's going to be my base coat, which I'm going to make from ferric nitrate. Once that is done, then I'm going to go back and put a green over the top of that, and I'm going to make that out of cupric nitrate. Now there's as many different patina formulas as there are people writing them down. So I'm going to give you just two very basic ones. The first one, like I said, is going to be a base coat of ferric nitrate, which is going to give us a brown to a rusty brown color, depending on the number of coats you put on. And then a very basic green, which I'm going to make out of cupric nitrate. Just as we did earlier with the chemical blackener, we need to wear rubber gloves and a respirator. And be sure that you have good ventilation in the area that you're working. The first mixture we're going to make up is ferric nitrate. Now this is sort of a trial and error as to how much you need to mix to make a strong enough solution. But I figure generally about one good chunk of ferric nitrate to anywhere from a cup to a cup and a half of distilled water. You don't want to use tap water. Distilled water works much, much better. Again, this will dissolve. Now to apply it, I have a soft bristle brush known as a patina brush. It has natural bristles, and the ferrule is made of plastic so that it won't rust when it comes in contact with the chemicals. Our heat source is going to be a propane torch. Propane, again, being much preferable to an oxyacetylene, if we won't tend to burn our finish as we're working on it. Now, it's very important that the metal that you're working on be sandblasted or cleaned with some sort of abrasive. It'll do two things. It'll make sure that you get off any oil, wax, or anything that might have contaminants that might be on the surface. And two, it'll give it a little bit of a tooth to help the patinas bond to it. If you're having trouble getting your patinas to stick, it's either your material's not hot enough or more than likely your material's not clean enough. You know it's hot enough when you hear that hissing as it hits the surface and vaporizes immediately. Okay, all of your patinas are going to begin with a base coat of either ferric nitrate or liver of sulfur. Liver of sulfur will give you a blacker finish than this. I prefer the brown. I think it's a softer look. Because these patinas are applied hot, they tend to bite into the material and they're much more durable. Many of the patina formulas that you'll see include more than one chemical. I'm giving you just two very basic ones. Depending on the chemicals you use, you can achieve blues, or you can use bismuth nitrate to achieve white. You can get reds, and greens. Now that I have my base coat of ferric nitrate, I'm going to apply some green highlighting to it. I'm going to make a very simple green formula using cupric nitrate. So, a couple of good chunks of cupric nitrate. And about a cup and a half of distilled water. We'll mix this up. Again, we'll change patina brushes. You want to save brushes, don't want to use them for different colors. This is one I use for green. Again, the propane torch. Patination is an art form in itself, and those that are very good at it are in high demand. They can not only create wonderful patinas on new work, but they can restore a lot of the old work. Seems that the higher the copper content in your material, the easier it is to patina. Therefore, silicon bronze or Evador, which are both above 90% copper, they tend to patina easier than something like naval bronze, which is more in the 65% copper range. Again, you want the material hot enough to where the patina vaporizes when it hits the surface. Okay, what I have here is the result of one coat of ferric nitrate followed by one coat of cupric nitrate. It's probably the most basic of all the green-brown combinations you can do. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to blend this in a little bit by using Scotch-Brite. Take off a little bit of the green, expose a little bit more of the brown underneath it, and then I'll go over the whole thing with Incralac. And when it dries, I'll wax the piece. Keep in mind that the acrylic does tend to change the color slightly. Tends to mute the greens a little bit. I don't think it changes it that much because it is designed specifically for this purpose, but it does change it a little bit. Now that it's cooled, I'm going to put a couple of light coats of acrylic on. When that sets up, then I'm going to apply a coat of wax to it. Another finish that you can make is using bronze powders. Here's an example of some of the colors. We have a couple of shades of green, we have a blue, we have a gold. They come in 70 or 80 different shades. The bronze powders are not suitable for exterior work. They need to be sealed before they go outside. They have some colors that are actually made from aluminum and that are tinted, that those are suitable for exterior work. Now to apply them, you can mix it with any liquid. You could mix it with lacquer, you could mix it with some clear coat. In this case, I've mixed it with shellac and denatured alcohol. And I've put it in this little spray can that I'm going to spray a little bit on to give you an idea how this works. You could also use one of the spray bottles that we used earlier for the rust or the verdigris finishes to apply this. Now I've gone on and put this rather heavy just to show you the effects you can get from it. Typically you would want to just highlight certain areas with it. Another way that you can apply this is by mixing some of the powder with paste wax. And then you can simply rub it on. To highlight certain areas on the work. And once this dries, I can come back and buff this. And have some shiny highlights. Now that the wax has dried, I'm just going to buff and take off any excess. And again, you can make these colors yourself, just mixing with some paste wax, and use them to highlight rosettes, collars, castings, whatever. It's a very simple accent. Okay, we can do the same thing using powdered graphite. We can mix it with some paste wax. And again, we'll just rub it on some of the areas. Let it dry and we'll buff it off. It'll give us a metallic sheen. Okay, now this won't change the color per se, but it'll make that area a little brighter. Give it an almost polished metal appearance. There's another way that you can use the graphite that I've never had any success with, but you can mix it with your paint, and you spray a door or gate, whatever it is you're working on, with the graphite mixed in the paint. And before the paint fully hardens, you take and rub the paint down with a cloth, and it'll bring the graphite to the surface. But like I say, if you're doing anything big, it's kind of hard to do the entire thing and have the paint at the right consistency. What I've done in the past is, before the paint was fully cured, I rubbed the graphite on the surface as opposed to trying to mix it in the paint initially. The graphite will wear off. So if it's in an interior setting, you have to have it somewhere that somebody's not going to brush up against it or touch it with their hands. You need it somewhere in an area that's not going to be handled. Now we'll just let this small area dry, and then we'll buff it. Okay, now that our wax is dried, I'm just going to give it a quick buffing. And I realize it probably doesn't show up well on tape, but it does make for an interesting effect. Almost a gunmetal look. Something other than just your basic black. So there you have it. Everything that I know about finishes, and maybe a few things I made up as I went along. But the important thing is that you read the materials out there and that you practice. Just experiment with pieces now and again. Have pieces laying around your showroom for your clients to look at. Try something different from your basic wrought iron black that so many people request. Hope you enjoyed it and you found this beneficial.